Ever since humans began as nomadic cave dwellers, we always had an insatiable urge to explain the reality around us. We still learned that it wasn't easy. Now, many thousands of years later, we still have issues that even the greatest scientists of our time cannot solve. You would think that one of the hardest, most confusing topics today would maybe be about the nature of dark matter and energy, what the fundamental nature of reality is, or how many dimensions exist. Surprisingly, the problem we will be talking about today is none of those. It is something that humans have wondered about since the dawn of reasoning itself, something so great that people have made entire religions out of it, and something that still, after so many years, presents itself as one of the biggest puzzles humanity has ever faced. Figured it out yet? It is consciousness, with the ability to be self-aware and to think about thinking itself. But why is this such a confusing topic? Surely, if we are on the brink of discovering the fundamental nature of reality, we would have figured this out by now. Well, the answer is no, because consciousness itself is a paradox. It is the brain trying to comprehend itself, and then trying to comprehend comprehending itself, and so on. It gets very confusing fast. Consciousness also poses a myriad of questions, such as, if I am me, then why am I not somebody else? Why am I a human instead of a dog or a snake? What will happen when I die? Is everyone else conscious of themselves the way I am conscious of myself? In this video, we will be diving deep into the answers to all of these questions, and along the way explaining how consciousness works, what it is, and how it can be the answer to explaining the fundamental nature of reality itself. Part 1. The origin of consciousness. Consciousness may be the most complicated and organized thing in our universe. It seems impossible that it could simply evolve from lifeless carbon and hydrogen. This is why, over the years, many people took an alternative route to explain the evolution of consciousness and believed instead that it was created by a divine being with intention and purpose. This became known as religion. However, consciousness did actually evolve from lifeless matter, to the surprise of many. It was a long and difficult process, but it worked out in the end. I will put a link to a video explaining it in better detail in the description below. You see, in order for a life form to survive, it must get energy in the form of food. It can find that by sensing the environment around it, usually done by vision or smell. But in that case, an organism can only pursue its food as long as it sees it or smells it. If the food hides from sight, the organism can no longer pursue it. To stop that, evolution's next step is to be able to visualize food even in its absence. So the next time the food hides behind a wall, the organism will know that it hasn't disappeared but is hiding behind the wall, even though it can't actually see the food through the wall. It is called memory. This inner representation of the world was a very crude, very simple form of consciousness, but over millions of years it has evolved into what we have today. Our consciousness is way more complex and sophisticated than simple memory, so complex that we don't know quite how it functions. So then, what is consciousness exactly? Part 2. What is consciousness? Consciousness, stated simply, is the state of being aware of yourself. But there is a lot of fuzziness around this statement. Isn't just being the state of being aware of yourself? What is awareness anyway? You see, one of the main reasons consciousness is so hard to explain is that we use it to describe and explain our universe. It is impossible to explain something without being conscious of it. And this works against us when we try to explain what consciousness is. How can we be conscious of being conscious? This makes absolutely no sense and is quite impossible. The truth is, consciousness is a paradox. It is existence running itself in an endless circle. You cannot be conscious of being conscious. You cannot think about thinking. When you try to explain consciousness, you are stuck in an endless loop of awareness. And this is the reason why even modern science, with all its technology and tools, is nowhere closer to explaining consciousness than philosophers 2,000 years ago. Consciousness isn't some enigma that's answer is always just out of reach. It's a paradox. Consciousness isn't some mysterious and magical soul that penetrates life and continues after death. It's in fact a very real and very physical thing that we all have inside our incredibly complex brains. And humanity has been duped by it ever since we initially tried to explain it. Consciousness, scientifically explained, is the brain's ability to be aware of itself and its surroundings in order to help it survive. And that's all it is. However, that might not be true. Thanks to a few new studies in the field of quantum mechanics, consciousness may actually be all that reality is made of. Part 3. biocentrism and quantum consciousness. It makes sense that consciousness is a physical thing in the end. I mean, what else could it be? According to quantum mechanics, however, it may be what defines our universe. You see, unlike classical physics, which describes with great accuracy the macroscopic world that we live in, quantum mechanics describes the microscopic world of the very small. You would think that particles would behave like macroscopic objects and be like small building blocks that build up to create reality. Well, you couldn't be more wrong. To the great surprise of many major physicists, it was found that tiny particles like photons or quarks behave incredibly bizarrely and strangely. Instead of being like solid building blocks, they are actually more like a wave of probability. Now, this isn't too hard to wrap your head around, because this means that there is an even smaller building block of reality, information. Which is really bizarre is that as soon as you observe the particle, for example, by looking at it with a microscope, it shifts out of the wave of probability and becomes a regular particle again. This essentially means that everything you are not looking at doesn't exist. If you were to put a table in a room and close the door, the table would exist as a probability wave. But as soon as you open the door and observe the table, it would instantly become a table again. So, does this mean that reality only exists when it is observed by a conscious observer? This idea is called biocentrism, and it states that consciousness is fundamental to a universe. Without it, the universe would exist in a state of superposition and nothing would ever happen. This is mind-boggling. How can consciousness be fundamental? Why consciousness? Why not something else? This theory makes absolutely no sense, and I'm happy to say that it is wrong. A particle needs to be observed, otherwise it exists in a cloud of superposition. But that observation isn't just limited to consciousness. An interaction between two particles also counts as an observation. So in truth, although consciousness is incredibly complex and amazing, it has no metaphysical meaning other than to help its organism survive in its environment. In fact, you won't believe how many things in life consciousness can be responsible for. Part 4. The Virtuality Principle. When you are bored, what do? Most people say they would read a book, or watch a movie, or play video games. But what do these have in common? You do them all because of what I am calling the Virtuality Principle. Have you ever wondered why you can get so lost in a good story, or just can't put down that game? Well, one of the reasons why is because of this. You see, your brain loves learning new things in life, but one of its tasks is to make good choices. To do that, you play out those outcomes in your head. In fact, one of the main purposes of dreams is to simulate what would happen if you did this or that, instead of doing what you actually did. This is also why you daydream, to wonder, what if? What if aliens suddenly invaded? What if the world ended? What if I got more subscribers? Well, I would be really happy in that final case, you know. Well, I think that this can be why your brain loves stories so much. A good story is jam-packed with choices and outcomes, making it your brain's favorite food. In movies and in video games, there are also stories. In fact, nearly everything you do for leisure in real life, like reading or watching a movie, are all designed to create a virtual reality in your brain. In cases like VR, the virtual world is already there, while in a book you have to imagine the virtual world yourself. So, consciousness and the brain are responsible for nearly everything you do in your life. But what is life anyway? What is being? Why are we here? And what happens when we die? Part 5. The Dreams of Omega. So far we have talked about what consciousness is, but we have skipped the greater meaning altogether. Consciousness is what creates the feeling of being. But what is being anyway? What is reality? Do we exist? And what happens when we are not here anymore? When we die? Well, obviously, you might think, our universe has to exist. As I said in my video, The Raisin, although reality isn't exactly as we perceive it to be, it has to exist, because there must be something stimulating our brain to create our perception of reality, or consciousness. And so I thought that we had to exist. Otherwise, we will not be here to tell the story, right? And so that is what I thought until a new experiment in the field of quantum mechanics popped up. Its conclusion was incredible. That down at the smallest, most fundamental section of reality, particles were so incredibly unpredictable that they pretty much ceased to exist. And this meant that, you guessed it, reality is an illusion. But how can this be? If reality is a complete illusion, then what is stimulating consciousness? We must exist. There is no way around it. Except, maybe whatever is stimulating our consciousness is an illusion too. Let's imagine that in the far future, humankind will be advanced enough to build a massive supercomputer that can create an absolutely perfect simulation of reality itself. So perfect that every single particle in its universe functions exactly like the particles in ours. What, then, would be the difference between our reality and the computer's reality? The answer is that there would be none. You could say that we are being stimulated, but what are we being stimulated by then? It can't be by a computer in another universe, as that universe would be simulated as well, and so on, since reality is an illusion. So then, what are we being simulated by? Well, maybe it could be by Omega itself. Since Omega contains within it every possible universe, maybe we could be one of the possible universes inside of it. The universe is most likely made of mathematical information, and if that is true, then our entire universe may just be a probability that exists within the infinitely many other probabilities in a timeless state. So, do we physically exist? Or is the entire universe a timeless probability of occurring, and we are just living it out, having the illusion of time? Well, it seems like we will never know if we exist or not. We could be physically real, being created by quantum creation, or we could just be the dreams of Omega. Only until we can find a successful theory of everything can we know for sure. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. As always, this video was made by Alexander Rafel and edited by Samuel Rafel and Bhavani Gopal Krishna. The concepts presented in this video were based on the amazing book Everything Forever, Learning to See Timelessness by Gavin Jordan. As always, if you want more amazing and groundbreaking ideas about timelessness, existence, and the true nature of reality, please visit everythingforever.com or buy Everything Forever, Learning to See Timelessness by Gavin Jordan. Thank you for your support, and be sure to subscribe and like this video.